Hello everyone, welcome back for another tag video. So we did one for Mabon and now we are doing one for Samhain. So this is my own tag I created myself. I'll have the questions down below if you would like to do it and tag me so that I can see your answers to this. So question number one, what is Samhain? For a lot of people this is ancestor time and the dead and the thinning of the veil. It also could be the final harvest or when the god dies, and it's also the crone and or pregnant goddess. Not exactly sure how that's supposed to work because it's the crone, but then she's gonna give birth at like the next one. So logic. So for me, Samhain is the time to honor our dead, but not always having to be in a somber way. It's just a family reunion of sorts. They just happen to be dead. But also to still focus on being alive and being happy, because I don't think our ancestors really want you to be constantly grieving endlessly. And the idea of like the silent supper, I don't like to call it a dumb supper. I think that's probably not the greatest term. I've heard it's a bit offensive to the deaf community because it's silent. So I don't use that term, but I don't think it needs to be a silent dinner. My ancestors would be perfectly content with us talking. And so just kind of observing the conversations. And so ancestors is a huge part of Samhain, especially as we've had more and more recent ones getting added. I'm not a believer that the ancestors have to be like ancient. They can be very recent. Like we just have one. We have a funeral coming up this week actually. And so they're now included in the ancestor list. But I don't like to keep it just a focus on that. I also do keep a little bit of the Witch's New Year, not a whole lot. Mostly any like witchcraft specific things that I want to work on, I will do at this time. So I have dedicated many moons for the Inner Temple of Witchcraft on Samhain. This year, it's happening. I'm actually finishing it and I can move on to book 2 finally. It's been years. So very excited for that. And so naturally it has that witchy element to it and a little bit more fun. And of course I also follow the idea that it's the final harvest. This is when we bring our sprinklers in, we stop watering the grass and stuff, and you see the farmers kind of bringing in their stuff as well. Usually around Halloween and afterwards it becomes like winter time and we can get snow and it gets really cold and a lot of frost. Last year it took a very long time to actually have winter hit, and I have a feeling it's gonna happen again because summer didn't start until like mid to late June. So I'm thinking like the wheel just kind of got like a twist. And so winter might not really start until right around Yule, so we'll see. But typically this is when we start to winterize stuff. Number 2, what correspondences are important for you to incorporate at this time of the year? So of course, you can't have Halloween and Samhain without having like skulls and pumpkins and basically the stuff that you're harvesting at this time of year and you see a lot in pop culture. So for me, the correspondences have to be the autumn colors of like oranges and reds and yellows and blacks. Pumpkins, squashes, having like apples and apple cider and like the cozy kind of herbs, so like the cinnamon, nutmeg, those kinds of things. And of course pumpkin spice, because of course. And then I also incorporate a lot of the death imagery, just it's Halloween. You do that. So you have a lot of like the skulls and tombstones, and you know, also just like general witchy stuff is around a lot more frequently. And so I just kind of feel like this is the time of year to heighten the witchy element of stuff, and I just incorporate that throughout my entire existence, really. My yard obviously is going to be decorated, and of course you can add a witchy twist to it. Your decor can mean multiple things. To outside people just glancing into your yard, it's just a gloriously decorated house for Halloween. And for witches, it can actually have significance. It could be inviting your ancestors with various tombstones, and you could also include having the like posable skeletons as representations of all of the dead of your own house. And there's various ways to incorporate witchcraft. Question number 3. Do you celebrate Samhain and Halloween differently? Why or why not? So for the longest time, I really felt like they had to be 2 separate things. That Halloween and Samhain were different. Samhain was the somber event that was just about the dead, and Halloween was fun. And I've kind of slowly gotten to a point where I can see the balance of both. And I can appreciate that it can be both simultaneously. I've gotten to a point where it doesn't need to be so somber all the time, which is ironic now that I have more of my loved ones on the other side of the veil. But I like the idea that Samhain is just a family reunion with the dead. And it also is a time to really witchify your life. And so it's a great time, in my experience, for witchy dedications. A lot of people do that at Imbolc. I feel like Samhain is way more appropriate because everything spooky is around. You just got the magic vibe in the air. And I mean, let's just be real. Halloween and witches just go hand in hand. And so the decor, I've slowly started to accept that it's like I can have a separation in my mind of like some things are just because it's Halloween and I like how it looks. And some things it is reminders. So I will have my altar decorated with like pumpkins because it's the final harvest. That's like one of the last things to be harvested in the year. And like skulls because like dead. And then I also will have all of my crystal balls out and my magical tools galore are out and about. And also, you know, like the tombstones, they could be to represent just Halloween and funny little sayings, or it could be for my dead. And of course, like we go and visit the family graves and stuff, so like having that a little bit closer, especially for the graves that don't exist. Like we've had a few that they don't get buried, they're cremated. And they don't have a place, so you could do it that way. Like there's a lot of ways to kind of incorporate it in different ways than you would typically think of, but I've gotten to the point where I've realized like Halloween and Samhain can be the same thing. They don't have to have one be this really sad and somber moment and the other be like this fun thing where you're going to a pumpkin patch with your friends, or you're going to a haunted house, or you're getting a pumpkin spice latte. Like, they can coexist. What is your favorite tradition for this time of the year? So my favorite thing about Samhain is something that I started very early in my witchcraft journey, and that is to visit my family's graves. We've done this every year pretty much since, I want to say sometime in high school. Keeping in mind I'm now 26. So what we do is we will typically bring flowers and we make a kind of mandala on the graves. And sometimes we'll bring offerings of like a little pumpkin or something. Other years we don't, but we usually always bring flowers. Sometimes we will get specific food items and enjoy them while we're hanging out with our dead for a little bit. It's getting to the point we have to take multiple days now, I think, because we just run out of time. We have a lot of stops to do. And so I think it's gonna have to be like a weekend because we have a lot. We have now 2 new ones from this year alone to add to the mix. Number 5, do you have a special dish or drink that you only enjoy this time of the year? So I love to make the pumpkin bread from The Simple Sabbath by Charming Pixie Flora. I don't know if you can still buy that book. It was M. Flora Peterson at the time for her author name. And I don't know if you can still get it, but her recipe is phenomenal. And so I like to make that every year. It's a really like hearty kind of a bread, but the dipping sauce is scrumptious. So I love to make that every year. And my current drink of choice, it's not going to be around for long because it's a very limited supply, but currently my go-to is to use one of my ancestors' drinks. They actually made wines. And so my family gave me a few bottles of it and they just kind of spread it around. And so I have a number of them left. And so we only drink that on Samhain night. 1 bottle, split between the 3 of us. It does not go very far, but he used to make wine. And so it's a very special drink. Afterwards, I'll probably sub out the alcohol and go back to like a sparkling cider, which is what I've done for years. Number 6, are there any myths that you include? At Maybon, we talked about the like Persephone myth and how a lot of people incorporate that for that time of the year. So what ones do you incorporate for Samhain? So for myself, I really haven't had a whole lot that I've like used for year after year. It's more of archetypes and just kind of the season as a whole. The idea of it being, you know, for the dead, and so naturally like the gods that are for the dead are usually honored at this time. But this year I'm starting to incorporate a little bit. So for this year I am using the death of Balder as kind of the main focal point for one of my rituals. And so it'll be honoring Hel and her coming to take Balder like she's supposed to, and how, you know, we don't always want to lose our loved ones, but Hel's a very compassionate goddess from my experience. Again, I've only worked with her for a little bit, but so far she's lovely. I cannot wait to meet her one day, in several decades hopefully. But I like the idea of having this be the time when Balder dies, and so then he'll come back at Yule. There isn't the myth recorded of when he comes back, but the gods have a tendency to die and then be undead in like a later story. So the time continuum kind of doesn't really apply. They're just gone for a while, but regardless, you wouldn't want a loved one gone for any period of time. And so I'm going to have this be the time when Balder dies, and then at Yule to honor him returning. Again, there's not myths supporting that, but he comes back and he's there, so I'm gonna include it. And then also at this time of the year, I haven't found a specific deity that I really want to work with for this, but I'm feeling like Freya is my choice for now. And that is to work on the aspect of like the witch and the witchcraft element. Again, Samhain is really, really, really a spooky time, and therefore there's a lot of witch imagery and a lot of witchy vibes in the air anyways. So why not incorporate a little bit of a witch goddess? And so I'm working with her and also kind of trying to bring the magic and the fun back into this holiday. And that might take a few years. Same, like with Yule, it was kind of easier, but it still took a few years to really hone in on what traditions I wanted to have that I can do with or without people, and it's just my holiday and my way of like claiming that time, because it wasn't always like the greatest time of the year. It usually brought up a lot of drama and a lot of fights, and so it was just always a stressful time. So now I've made it so Yule is my sacred time, and I'm working on doing that for Samhain as well. But I'm hoping working with Freya and that aspect of her as the kind of the witch, she was pretty much on par with Odin for a lot of stuff. And so she also, I'm pretty sure it was Freya, that knows like and I might be mispronouncing it, but satyr magic, where it's like the women's mysteries, and also like she also knows the runes. She has a whole like 8 just dedicated to her, like it's her set of them. And so I just felt like this was a good time to incorporate that aspect of Freya. Number 7, are there any magical spells that you reserve for this time of the year? So like Poppets, ancestor offerings or workings, or even magical pumpkin carving. So of course, I like to magically carve my pumpkins. I give them a specific purpose, and I'm not always saying that like you have to have like runes carved for your pumpkins or whatever, or to have like magical symbols per se, but just the intention of you're carving this as a like guiding light for your ancestors and people who are just kind of still lingering around but would like to move on, or for bringing in protection for your home and prepping it for when, you know, winter comes. I also like the idea of doing magic specifically with the ancestors. Again, when we visit the graves, we do a little bit of a thing there. And then I've mentioned this, I take this time as my witchy dedication time. A lot of people tend to do that at Imbolc. And also, if you know the day that you specifically became a witch, like myself, I found the date exactly. And so I know my exact witchiversary, but I like to restart a lot of stuff at Samhain. So again, moving into the next book in the Temple series. Finally, we're getting out of Inner Temple of Witchcraft. We're doing Outer Temple of Witchcraft. We're moving slowly. Number 8. What is your favorite Samhain memory? This could also be your favorite Halloween memory, especially if you haven't celebrated a lot of Samhains yet. My favorite one has been many moons ago. I think it's actually about at least 10 years probably at this point now. Maybe 9 years, something like that. It was a long time ago, but I was old enough to drive, and so I took that Samhain, that Halloween night, and I reclaimed it. I was over it because I had no friends. I had nobody to go hang out with on my favorite day of the year, and I did not want to just sit around and hand out candy to trick-or-treaters, and that was the only thing I was going to do for Halloween. And I was over it. I did not want to have to become an adult yet, and I thought it was really lame that I didn't have anything to do for my favorite day of the year. Halloween's been my favorite day since I can remember. And to finally have the first year where it was the biggest disappointment, and I was just over it. Because it happened for a couple years by that point. My last Halloween that I actually hung out with like any group of people was in 7th grade when I was 12. And from then on out, I just progressively would get less and less excited for Halloween, as much as I love it, because I didn't have friends to go hang out with. And I just had to sit at home and hand out candy and watch movies and just be really depressed about it. And so that year I was like, no, screw this. I have a car, I have a driver's license. I don't need people. I can make this day for myself. And so I told my mom, I'm like, I need to go do this. You deal with trick-or-treaters, bye. And so she handed out the candy to the kids, and I went to the only grave that I really knew, and that was for my aunt and my uncle. And I knew the cemetery. I didn't know where they were at. I never found them because it's a pretty big cemetery. So eventually I gave up my quest, and I just picked a headstone that had at some point fallen over and broken to a few pieces, and somebody had just kind of stacked them up awkwardly. And I was like, you know what? I'd feel pretty bad because like you couldn't even read it anymore. The phrase was like completely gone. Whatever the name and dates and if they had any like little sayings on there, it was gone. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna sit at this unnamed, unknown, well, I could probably find out if I actually had gone into the building. But at that point, I had no idea who this was. And it wasn't easy to access who this was. And so I sat down and I gave an apple as an offering and just kind of hung out. It was a little creepy because I was 16, sitting in a cemetery at some random person's grave, and like some old guy just like had a big dog and walked up and chatted with me for a little bit, and it was like, okay, bye. Like, in that moment, I realized the stupid that was me. Like, I didn't bring any kind of protection. I didn't bring even like the most basic things that a lot of TikTokers tell you to do nowadays, like to bring like one of those heavy metal water bottles that has like the handle so you can just like bam people. I didn't bring that. I didn't bring pepper spray. I didn't bring like a concealed thing. I didn't bring anything. And I was like, that was really, really stupid at like dusk. But it was fine. Eventually he left. And I went to the car and I felt exhilarated because I did it. I did a very witchy thing on a very witchy day, and I didn't need anybody. I didn't have anybody to enhance that night. It was just me, and I made the magic that I wanted. And I was so proud of myself. And so that is always going to be one of my favorite memories because I took action to make the day that was going to be sad and going to be depressing again, and I made it just for me. Number 9, what are your Samhain plans for this year? I make a video specifically dedicated to this, so I won't answer it here. That video will be coming soon so that you know what I am planning to do this year. Number 10, do you celebrate for a single day or multiple days? So I used to try and do a lot of the Halloween and Samhain celebrations just on that day, and then just kind of keeping the theme throughout the season. Kind of. I start early, and then like November, I instantly take it all down and move to Yule. This is the time of the year that I'm like, screw it. We are moving ahead. I'm ready for the next one. I am done with previous. I'm ready to go. And so like I usually decorate for Halloween in September. And this year I didn't get a whole lot of it done because we were going to be gone. And so I didn't. And now I'm like, what's the point? And I'm not going to leave it up throughout November. The actual like celebration side of stuff and like the witchy things that I'll be doing, I'm doing a lot of the like spell workings that I want to do during this season now in the few weeks leading up to Halloween and Samhain. And then for like the very specific Samhain things, like visiting our family graves, I'll be doing that like the weekend before because again, I want to split it up and be able to actually take some time with our loved ones. And I think Halloween's on a Monday this year anyways. So I'm going to be going like Saturday we'll do half the cemeteries that we need to hit and half the next day because it's just too much to try and pack into one day. And then we'll do our ritual fire on Halloween night. And I'm planning on using like some of our sparklers that we have from our wedding left over to send off some wishes, and then still have plenty more to use for multiple holidays coming up. But yeah, so like kind of mostly around this time, like, but it's not just one day. I just can't fit it into one day anymore. Number 11, do you celebrate as a group or solitary? Most of my rituals I do solitary. Our sacred fire I usually do with my family, and if they want to join in they can, but for the most part they usually don't. Number 12, do you decorate your home or just your altar? I feel like all of us decorate for Halloween and Samhain. We got the imagery everywhere, but maybe you don't. But yeah, I have my entire yard is Halloween. Most of my inside of my house is Halloween. I have decor that's year round that's Halloween. But yes, I decorate the whole space, not just my altar. And then number 13, with it being spooky season, have you experienced anything paranormal? So I think there was a paranormal tag eons ago, so I think I'm just gonna do that and we'll just dive into it a little bit more there. So anyways, that is my Samhain tag. I would love to hear your answers for this one in the comments down below. Make sure to like and subscribe. I post every single day. Thank you to my patrons. If you would like to support me on Patreon, it is patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. And until next time, thank you so much for watching and blessed be.